AJ, I understand that you and Bernie recently had an exciting conversation over coffee, and we actually captured it just like TMZ. We zoomed in, and we are going to eavesdrop on this
All right,
conversation. So,
and for everyone's sake, if you don't know who Bernie's the Peter F. Drucker Chair
that's right.
At the Drucker School of Management at Claremont University.
And he's been on the town halls many times.
Yes, yeah. Hey, Bernie. You know, everyone's talking about a potential of a fairly significant, sustained, economic slowdown, right? Which is going to have substantial impacts, probably across the board, across many different industry verticals. What's your view on that? What do you think is going to really happen here, and how should companies try to react to that?
It's a great question, AJ. A great question. So let me be a little bit controversial here, in the interest of the fact that we're heading into the end of the year, and it's looking like a fairly dismal kind of potential next year. So there's the traditional way that a company would approach this would be use scenario planning.
Right.
They would sit back and they would say, typically in 4 quadrants, they would typically sit back and say, wow, there's a lot of trends unfolding in the industry. There's a bunch of stuff that's going to happen. It could be a massive downturn, could be a tweak, could be a dip, could be a rebound. We don't really know what's going to happen. And then they sit back and they do some thinking about, well, what are we going to do from a resource allocation strategy perspective, given the way this is happening, right?
And usually what happens is most companies stick to the status quo and basically just essentially advise themselves to continue to be on the lookout.
So Peter Drucker has a point of view, again, 1954, Practice of Management, where he says, great managers don't accept the economic conditions that are in front of them. They shape the economic conditions. They influence the economic conditions. So to put that in very concrete terms in today's terminology, we used to teach Porter's 5 forces as that's the industry attractiveness.
Right.
And now, what basically Drucker's saying is those are exogenous. Those are variables, or the endogenous. Those are variables we can influence. We can influence substitute products. We can influence technology. We can influence competitive dynamics. We can influence buyer behavior, right? So if you accept the idea that the environment is shapeable, then that's a really different way to think about it as compared to let the environment come at me, as opposed to let me try and shape some of the things that are in front of me. Now, I'm not saying I as a firm can shape the overall world economy and the GDP of North America, but I can shape things that are operating in my industry by the actions that I take on the chessboard of the competitive dynamic.
So not letting the scenario unfurl itself in front of you, but actually rather create your own path.
Yeah. So let me talk about a concrete way to do that.
Yeah.
So I've developed this thing called a point of view exercise. The point of view exercise should be done by the C-level team. The C-level team sits down and says, here are 75 or 100 trends that are unfolding in the marketplace. Okay. Now that's not helpful. So then what they have to do is say, they have to go through sort of a hard process of getting it down to the 6 or 7 key trends they think are unfolding. And those trends should be articulated in a way that's choiceful. So in other words, a trend should not be customers are going to become more price sensitive. Wow, that's not. But if you say customers in emerging markets are going to become much more price sensitive, those in the more developed economies are not going to be as price sensitive. That's choiceful. If you say I need to have a lot more products at a lot more price points in order to compete in the global economy, that's choiceful. Saying I'm not going to play here and here, I got to play across the whole spectrum. If you say, for example, that we're going to be in a much more resource-constrained environment from the standpoint of water and power and other stuff, and that actually is going to manifest it directly in terms of the cost dynamics of our industry, that's choiceful. Okay, so if you can get it down to the 6 or 7 major trends that you believe are significant and are going to shape the evolution of your industry, then all of a sudden you can get behind those trends and say, I'm going to ride that trend, and to the extent that I can, I'm going to shape that trend. So for example, one of the things that's happening clearly and unambiguously right now, and maybe this is too late of a trend because it's already here, is digital transformation.
Yes.
Every single company's gone through digital transformation, right? The interesting question is, what's the time to thing unfolding over the next 18 months in a world of a downturn in the economy? What is digitization going to look like for me over the next 18 months? And what's the nature of that? Is the digitization really a acceleration of customer-facing sets of issues that are unfolding, or is digitization really a question of reconfiguring my cost structure, right? The point is, we know digitization is probably going to be one of the trends. The question is, what exactly is that trend? What exactly does it mean in my industry? And the more I can be specific about that in my industry, the more that I can resource behind it and allocate resources and redefine my strategy based upon it. So, long story short is great executive teams of 10 people are on the same page with the 5 or 6 big trends.
So
and each individual function, each area, each C-level executive is thinking about those trends, is thinking about the implications for their particular area of the firm. This is an incredibly important exercise.
So you're dissecting the trends down to the point where you could start to make choices.
Correct. Correct.
About your business with respect to the trends, right?
That's correct.
Versus a traditional scenario planning approach, which is trying to understand the exogenous factors.
Correct.
Right? And then basically, essentially being on the lookout, right?
Yeah.
For what those factors will do to drive you in direction.
And where are they
you're
going
safe.
and migrating this way, so I'm going to go that way. Versus being much more aggressive, proactive, much more deterministic, much more I'm in control of what's going on. And by the way, if you articulate those 6 trends inside of the organization's going to have a lot more confidence. Man, these guys really know what's going on.
Sounds like this should be a part of the core strategy process for a company when they're going under what we used to call in our modern days, was it turbulent times?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's correct. And so I think every company right now in December of this year should be sitting down saying, given the way the economy's unfolding, given the dynamics of what's happening, given the dysfunctionality of governments across the globe, given the way that society's bifurcating in different groups, given blah, 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 now what?
Yeah.
What are the big... And by the way, I've done this exercise now for about 5 or 6 years, and one organization, I can't mention who they are, but they were a big industrial player, and they were doing things in a high capital sort of industry. And AJ, I don't want to give away the line, but I was in the room with 20 of these folks, and I said to them, hey, listen, this exercise point of view typically takes weeks. Okay, I'm going to explain the exercise, and we're going to do a breakout. And it's going to take 45 minutes, and we're going to try and see what happens in terms of whether we're on the same page. And the group in front of me said, we're on the same page. And I said, well, let's see, because this is a really good indicator as to whether, in fact, you are, it's an indicator that management really talks a lot and has a particular perspective around the evolution of marketplace.
Yeah.
So what's interesting about this group, AJ, the reason you're going to like this is, not only did I have the executive team, but they did a lot of government work. So I had 2 4-star generals retired in the room, right? And they're all saying, not only does our executive team know what's going on, our partners are going to say we. I said, there's no way this is going to happen. So I sent them in a breakout. 45 minutes, they come back. 6 trends, all on the same page.
Okay, do that with AJ right now. AJ, come up with, you two, do the scenario.
Well, yeah, I mean, the way we think about our business, Bernie,
Where
is
are the
as
6
follows,
trends?
is that because of all of the government spending that had to take place essentially during the COVID years, right? The huge amount of infrastructure spending, the healthcare spending, all of that, and then on top of that, with all the additional overseas contingency spending that we're still incurring over the war in Ukraine, right? That will create a level of deficit at some point. Now, in combination with perhaps a slowdown of the economy, I think perhaps pushed a little bit by the reserve, right, by the interest rates going up, that's going to perhaps put us into a period of government spending that will probably, for some sustained period, be in decline. Somewhat similar to what happened during the Budget Control Act years ago, over a decade ago. And so when that occurs, in our business, our natural intuition is that creates uncertainty amongst our clients, who are, 90% of our clients are federal contractors, right? So their clients are the federal government. When their spending goes down, then their economic conditions, their business circumstances change. It creates uncertainty for them, and since we're consultants to them, that actually essentially puts a cap on our addressable market. That's kind of the thinking that the conventional thinking we've had. Now, how do we take that into?
I can tell you, AJ.
All right.
It's a segmentation issue. So in other words, take the end customer, take the governments, right? And within governments, if you treat government as government, N of 1, you're screwed. But if you say to government, actually, everybody thinks of government as these 6 segments. First off, that's not the way we're going to think about it. So if everybody thinks of the government, there are 6 segments in the government, forget that. Ask yourself, begin to ask yourself, what are the various segments? So the reason you want to do this, AJ, is that forget that conventional segment. Start thinking differently about segments and ask yourself, are there potentially 12 segments? And are there 1 or 2 segments that, no matter what the hell happens in the world, they're going to spend more? and we're going to allocate our attention to segments 8 and 14 and not to the other ones. Because the other ones are going to be declining, right? So by putting all of our firepower against segments 8 and 14, all of our firepower, we're actually going to grow.
Bet the farm.
Bet the farm.
Invest disproportionately.
Yeah, we're going to win in those segments. And because
So you're not letting that scenario I just described unfurl and affect your business. Instead, what you're doing is trying to find that one path through that future that allows you to grow.
Yeah. And I would say segments 8 and 14 are not going to be, you got to think differently about them. They're not going to be, so if you look at the historical data and you track segments 8 and 14, you saw under downturns, spending went up. You don't necessarily have to take that as a given, right? So you need to do a little bit deeper work. I mean, certainly that's one thing you look at, right? But there's got to be areas where the government is going to be, at all costs, no matter how much debt they incur, they're going to keep spending. I guarantee that's the case. And so the question is, what does it look like? Who's going to aim 14? That's the hard work that somebody has to do. And then bet against it. That's what I would do. Next question.
Sounds so simple, Bernie.
Yeah, don't forget, I'm an academic.
As an academic.
As an academic, I'm going to have my coffee. I'm going to go back to my desk. I don't have to do the work. That requires results and activity and hard work. And that's not my strength. So, yeah.
There's a lot in your and Bob's book on organic growth playbook, which I know that we can use in our business because we haven't been as thoughtful as we should be about some of those upstream behaviors and how to kind of leverage that understanding. I think our company, as well as all of the competitors in the small industry we serve, think about value proposition from what's your service offering, right? And how do you differentiate service offering versus thinking about, what are some of those upstream behaviors, right, that you really need to understand, and then what's your value proposition to change those behaviors.
And it's funny about getting the team to think.
Yeah.
So in other words, if you took like the 4 or 5 folks that have your best folks, are the most experienced doing this stuff, and this certainly AJ and Jock would be 2 of those, but you take 4 other folks, and maybe a couple folks that are the former very significant positions within the military and other and just sit down and say, let's play out this game of far upstream of things, and let's see if we can tell any stories of ourselves over the last 20 years where we did things where things happened. Because I'd be willing to bet within short order you would come up with 10 or 12 behaviors, and you don't know which one's the winner, but you could brainstorm these behaviors, like did they ask us to help the specifications? Did they ask us for insight related to ABC? Did they want to meet with us to talk about our work in an adjacent space?
Yeah, I've got a great example of that. So recently we had an opportunity. It was a competitive opportunity. We competed against 2 other much larger companies than us, and perhaps even better brand recognition. It was I can mention who it is. It was Thales. They're looking at making a fairly significant investment in an initiative here in the U.S. defense market around a particular product of theirs. And they had sent us, I call it a fairly pedestrian RFP to respond to. It's the same RFP they sent to the other 2 competitors. And we took a look at it, and after really some thinking around it, we actually called the client and said, we're not going to respond to the RFP. And here are the 10 reasons why. We sent them a pretty well thought out memo as to why. And it was really at the RFP was basically asking the wrong questions. But that was something that we deliberately did. It took quite a bit of effort on our part, but that actually changed their behavior, where we became the favored contractor and we won that competition.
That's really interesting.
So I don't know, how many times we have opportunities like that, but that's something that we should be thinking. I think you're suggesting to us that's something we should be thinking about doing more as a regular practice when the circumstances are right.
I'd be willing to bet, AJ, I'd be willing to bet that. By the way, that's a great example. Great example, right? And by the way, the client didn't expect that either.
No, not at all.
Like, what the hell are they doing? What do you mean?
We had to convince them a little bit,
right?
And they were actually taken aback when we said we're not going to respond to your RFP.
Yeah, it's right. That's really. And by the way, the odds are they probably were not as knowledgeable about what was going on because they're probably playing in a different space. So you writing the memo, if someone's willing to read the memo and be open-minded, they're willing to kind of say, okay, this is let me kind of think about what this could be, right? And so I think what will be interesting in your world, AJ, would be to say, I'd be willing to bet there's probably 15 behaviors that are floating around out there, and maybe they're situationally dependent. So if the environment's operating in this way and the competitive dynamics here, these 2 behaviors are really the ones to play with. But if it's going over here, these are the other, there's the behavior at 7 and 8.
Yeah.
So it's worth, what's interesting is that it's not a lot of hard work. It's basically getting people really to think, right?
You're right.
And,
Yeah.
and have hypotheses.
Yeah.
This is the interesting thing. You don't have to go full bore on the organic growth playbook. You can have working hypotheses and test them. And then test the data, and then come back and say, well, actually, that did work that way. So let's go ahead and implement it. It's not unlike the client I mentioned earlier today. We had a conversation where I said, they did this. They did a fast cycle process, and we had working hypotheses that this was the key behavior. And over the next 6 months, the sales force is going to test it. And in 6 months from now, if it is the behavior, then bingo.
So we should run a lot of experiments. I mean,
Why
so
not?
we're looking for those high yield behaviors, right?
Right.
That basically
Right.
disproportionately drive business towards us.
Yeah. When you look at these behaviors, they
Yeah.
have to pass 2 or 3 screens. Number one is the behavior has to be significant enough. There has to be enough people, because if it's a small little behavior that only is going to influence out of 100 customers 5, it's not significant, right? Number 2 is it's got to be profitable. It may be the case that it's just so difficult to change that behavior, we can't get there. And number 3 is you may not want to rise all boats in the ocean. It may be the case that that behavior change disproportionately influences you. On the other hand, I've been in situations where the behavior change is one where the overall industry
Helps everybody else out too.
So the story in the book was for this particular asymptomatic disease condition, we said you need to conduct an objective test rather than subjective test. And conducting an objective test required a lot of work. But if they conducted the objective test, probability they bought our drug went up 6x.
An actual medical test.
Yeah,
okay.
an actual medical
blood
test.
test or
Yeah.
whatever. Okay.
Now it turns out every other drug in the marketplace also wanted the objective test because their drugs would also go up.
Got
It's
it.
like, okay, great.
Right.
So the big message in the marketplace: objective test, objective test, objective test, objective test, objective test. Eventually, the market thinks, well, shit, we better conduct the objective test. So there's a situation where everybody, we went up $1 billion, but somebody else went up probably $2 billion. But who cares? We went up $1 billion.
All right. I guess at the end of the day, it's not just about market share; it's also about overall organic growth.
Yeah.
We're actually out of time for this for this segment of our town hall. So we're going to come back during another town hall for part 2, and we all wish you and your family a happy Thanksgiving and holiday.
Thank you very, very much. It's been a pleasure. I really enjoy these a lot, AJ. So I'm happy to, whenever you need me to kind of wax poetically on different topics, I'm happy to do so with lots of confidence, maybe no knowledge, but that's nevertheless, I'm happy to do so. So thank you for the opportunity.
Excellent. Thank you, Bernie.
Okay, so what are you going to do for our incentive for people who come in to watch your town hall?
So if you watch the town hall, you will get a free copy, autographed copy of the Organic Growth Playbook that's actually targeted to you. So I will have your name. It'll be Dear Your Name from Bernie Jaworski, Peter Drucker Chair, Claremont, California.
All right, what better offer could we have than that?
I can't think of one.
Okay.
Well, that was very interesting. And AJ, having read this book now twice, see all the marks on it. I can't wait to hear more about this, about the application of this in our environment. We've got we've got work to do, and we're going to put something together for the industry.
Indeed,
Right?
indeed. We've got lots of great ideas just came out of that short coffee chat with Bernie.
Absolutely. That'll be very exciting. And we have a very, as Bernie said, he's made a very special offer. And if you do attend, I'm going to reiterate this, if you do attend the Global Town Hall, you will receive a personally autographed copy of the book. And we're going to make that happen.
You're right.
We're definitely going to make it happen.
And next year we're going to devote an entire session on organic growth for a Global Town Hall.